Lethal Force has been authorized and is advised, so lock and load and get ready to rumble. We're taking a quick peek at RICO. RICO, also known as RICO, which has to be said loudly since it's officially spelled with all caps, is a first-person shooter roguelike developed by Ground Shatter Games, and is only their second project to be released. Previously, Ground Shatter made the platform brawler Skyscrapers, which was all about trying to get to the top of a falling skyscraper first before everyone else did, so you don't, die and stuff. RICO keeps this interest in multiplayer with a take on co-op opposed to a versus mode, but it works just as well alone as it does with friends, although that does kinda ruin the basic plot a tad. There isn't a whole lot of plot to go on, really. The game is said to be a buddy cop first-person shooter, but without any kind of real story or character interaction, I hesitate to call it that. You pick a character, you pick a weapon, you pick a level, and you shoot the bad guys, and that is pretty much it. By now, there have been a good amount of roguelike first-person shooters to give people an idea of what that kind of game has to offer. RICO doesn't really do anything all that special with the idea, and fits into the genre in the most basic of ways, having both randomly pieced together levels and permadeath. There's a few different ways to play the game, be it going through a quick one-off level, taking a crack at a daily challenge, or trying to quote-unquote solve a case by completing a series of levels that have you killing a lot of people. While the main characters may be police officers, this is far from a tactical shooter like the SWAT series. Oh, no. RICO is all about putting as many bullets between you and anyone you meet as possible. One of the game's loading screens sums everything up nicely. Kick down doors, shoot men. That's really all there is to it. Back around 2009, shooters set in modern military times became somewhat obsessed with slow-motion breach and clear sections ever since Infinity Ward used it as a set piece in Modern Warfare 2. Breaking open a door or a wall to get a few seconds of slow-mo where players can take out multiple targets before they ever knew what hit them really seemed to become a thing for a while, with Call of Duty repeating the sequence many times over the years, and other games copying them and hoping to somehow tap into the franchise's success. The devs at Game Shatter seem to have been inspired by this as well, since it's the main mechanic incorporated into RICO. They really seem to think, hey, if those games did it a couple of times, what if we did it just all the time? Every level tasks players with clearing out a building full of dudes, with each building broken up into rooms that have closed doors ripe for the kickin'. There's no way to just open them normally, and enemies generally stay within the room they start in until you smash your way into it. Simply walk up to a door and press the E key to kick the thing down and activate slow motion. Then, like a bird, let the lead fly. It's very possible to clear a room before timers return to normal speed, and there's sometimes even side objectives for doing so repeatedly. Whenever a room's been fully vetted of thugs or goons in military garb, a big "Room Clear" pops up on screen letting you know it's safe to go to the next door and do it all over again. You can only crack into one room at a time, which helps negate getting too overwhelmed, as enemies also have guns and they aren't afraid to use them. There are really only two basic kinds of enemies: those with guns and those with melee weapons. Gun wielders have everything from pistols to shotguns, and you can usually guess what they'll be using depending upon which character model they have. Guys in tracksuits usually have a pistol or some kind of smaller weapon, while bigger dudes like bigger guns, and those covered in body armor have the biggest. Enemies with melee weapons like pipes or axes also have unique models depending upon which one they're using, but they act the same regardless. These guys just yell and run at ya without much of a care for self-preservation. Rooms come in various sizes with a good mix of different kinds of enemies, even though they sometimes don't make sense thematically. It's kinda weird to see military uniforms mixed in with suits and ties as well as general thug attire. It kinda feels like there was an idea for different factions, each with their own style at one point, but that idea was scrapped and everyone was just mashed together. Regardless of how enemies look, I do gotta say it can be rather satisfying to crack open a small room stuffed with enemies like a tuna can and just lay on the trigger before the slow motion effect ends. It really manages to capture that action movie feel, or at least it did the first few times. RICO's biggest issue is that while it may use randomization to put its levels together, you're always doing the same thing over and over and over again. The breaching mechanic can quickly start to lose its luster with just how many times the game has you do it in one level, and even though there are multiple objectives to complete, they're generally all the same. You've always got to collect evidence and clear out rooms, but sometimes there'll be bombs to defuse, money to collect, or assets to destroy. Grabbing evidence only consists of holding down the E key while looking at a briefcase for a second or two, which is also the same way you defuse bombs and interact with pretty much everything. Grabbing money or simply collecting health and ammo lying around all uses the same hold E for a bit mechanic, and it gets real old real quick. The only difference is that bombs existing in a level puts players on the clock, and if they don't defuse all of them in time, it's game over. It doesn't really make a ton of sense for the bad guys to set up armed explosives within the buildings they themselves are trying to defend from you, and you can revive yourself with a revive syringe if you happen to run out of health while getting shot. You can't do this after an explosion, and in a game with permadeath, you can really see how that can get annoying. Other objectives include getting specific kinds of kills, like the previously mentioned clearing of a room before slow-mo runs out, or getting a certain amount of headshots, or racking up a number of kills while sliding on the ground. Sliding's the only other way to break open a door, and not only does it look cool, it's also a good way to dodge bullets. It's pretty easy to do as well by just running and crouching, that is if the player character isn't getting caught up on the environment. There are a few different themes for levels as well, with each one dictating some kind of basic level design. Construction zones will always have explosive barrels lying around to help deal with enemies. Then one of the most interesting ones I found is the apartment theme, as it has 2 floors of rooms on each side of a landing that operates somewhat as a safe zone between groups of enemies. Something to always keep in mind is that completing specific objectives can cause reinforcements to start showing up, and, unlike normal enemies, these guys don't hide behind closed doors. They always spawn from off-screen in a room you've already cleared out, and will try to hunt you down, meaning it can be easy to get flanked by them when dealing with somebody else. For the most part, I never really found individual enemies to be all that much of a threat, but the guns that they use can be very difficult to dodge out of the way from, and I'd sometimes find myself on the low end of the health pool before I even knew what hit me. One of the biggest issues with RICO are its weapons. Not necessarily with how they work, but with how you can use them. Gunplay generally feels kind of okay all around, and like a good bit of feedback to really have that solid, meaty feeling when firing off in somebody's face, but this is only made worse by the pistol that you start with. The way weapons work is that after each level during a case, players will be rewarded with merit points based on their performance. Merit can then be used to buy weapons, attachments, health, armor, and even revives. Players can only carry 1 sidearm, 1 tactical weapon and 3 grenades at a time, and there's no way to switch out a weapon while in a level. It also seems to be somewhat random as to what will be available to be bought in the armory between levels, so you never know when you'll be able to come across something that's actually fun to shoot with. There's a lot of different levels to play during a case, and many different difficulties to pick from as you go through it, but I found that I really had to grind the easier levels for merit points in order to be able to find some kind of weapon to actually have fun with. The starting pistol is really basic, and due to weapons by themselves not being all that satisfying to fire, not that enjoyable to use. It was only once I got into shotguns and automatics that I started having some fun with shooting, and that's mostly due to enemies' reactions to getting hit more than firing the weapons themselves. They all have ragdoll effects, and while it can sometimes lead to weird situations, it does look good in slow motion. Shooting in a shooting game is the most important thing to get right, since it's what you're going to be doing the most often. And while RICO's shooting is passable, it falls short of a lot of other games for me. Even though there's aim down sights and difference in accuracy between it and hipfire, most enemies die quick and easy to just about anything, making many of the weapons come off as redundant. Weapon feel, especially when it comes to firearms, is a difficult thing to describe to someone when it comes to video games without them having played it for themselves. But to those who are familiar with first-person shooters, compare the shooting in something like Fear that has its meaty weapons to Half-Life 2's pea shooters, and RICO falls more on the Half-Life side of things. That's not to say it's really fair putting up a small game like RICO to either of these other two larger franchises, but if you've played them, then I think you get an idea of what I'm talking about. Overall, RICO can be an enjoyable shooter for a short time, but it's just a bit too repetitive and shallow for me to really get much out of it. The breaching mechanics got tiring too fast to really hold my attention for all that long, and that's what the game hinges itself on. I kind of wish Game Shutter would use this game as a framework to build off of for a more expansive and in-depth single-player experience in the future, as RICO's got some good groundwork, but it just doesn't quite feel done on its own. Permadeath setting your weapons back to the basic, boring starting pistol doesn't help much either. There is a kind of overarching progression system by gaining experience to unlock different traits that can be applied to your character, but those don't really do all that much to really change how the game plays, and instead only seem to affect stats like accuracy and damage. Stuff I never really had an issue with in the first place, and don't really care about having a couple numbers on them change. While RICO is a bit undercooked, it's still not a bad game, even if the gun model does feel a bit too close to my dang face! Just back off, man. Even changing the FOV doesn't do anything for this. It's still just right up in there. I don't think anybody would hold a gun like this at all, that close to their face. You'd hit yourself with the recoil. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of the game or this video in the comments section. I'm MegapieMan, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more quick peeks? Click on the video on the left for Tropico 6, the 6th installment in a totally not playing as Fidel Castro in charge of an island nation that's totally not Cuba's city management franchise. Or click on the video on the right for Debris, a first-person exploration game set below the Arctic Ocean.